Losing that content is the worst.
Hello, this is Travis Marker and America Francis. We're with Steward Growth, and today we're doing a presentation on when life gives you lemons. And just as an intro, these programs are available on YouTube. Hopefully, that's where you're seeing this. They are also, you can join us live for these events if you want to connect with us by finding out the schedule at stewardgrowth.com. You can also follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and I think there's some other things I can't remember right now, but today what we want to talk about is when life gives you lemons in regards to your kind of ecosystem. And this is we're just playing around with this idea a little bit. We're going to just see where the topic goes. Um, America thought about it, and it reminded me of my daughter's doing a high school assignment related to Bronfenbrenner. This is a Russian kind of sociologist, anthropologist, I don't know, who studied the idea of ecosystems and how ecosystems related. And he broke it up into five, different systems. We don't necessarily, we're not going to like do an expose on Bronfenbrenner, but one of the systems is your chronos system, which is the system that like changes over time. Things change over time, like things happen over time. There's your macro system, which might be a little bit more stable, but it's still the larger system that you live in and the dynamics that exist there. Then you have your exosystem, which is your indirect environment. So maybe this is the things that are not necessarily part of your specific environment, but you're living next to this environment, and it still has an impact on you. Then you have your mesosystem, which is the connections between your like your relationships, the people who are actually engaged in what you're doing, but they're not maybe like this is maybe what's happening at your high school, this is maybe what's happening at your church, but it's not necessarily your microsystem, which is your friends at church, your friends at school, your intimate family. And so those are the systems that he came up with, and so we're going to play around with that. Um, I only give you. Oh, and then there's the let's see. So there's the meso, there's the exo, which is your indirect environments. Then there's the meso system, which is the connection between your interpersonal environments. So it's not your microsystem.
Oh, and then micro.
Yeah, and then micro.
Okay.
So I did miss meso.
I think you did meso. I just didn't add micro at the end.
Oh, okay. So American apparently, I mentioned this name a little bit earlier, and you said you actually studied this in college. Do you remember anything about it?
I remember that guy's name. That's all I remember about that. I
Okay.
learned so many things. I read a ton and just go after input all the time. And I've replaced that with other things since then.
Well, I think what as my daughter brought this up, I thought it was interesting because as I engage as a mediator and a lawyer, oftentimes there are different systems that are in place in conflict,
Mm-hmm.
and so um, the stress of those different systems does play a role in how people manage their lives. So when life gives you lemons, there are factors that are not necessarily in your control, but they are definitely in your environment that are causing you stress. You know, as I think about like the Ukraine war, for example, that is something that's in that chrono system, right? It's not going to be there forever, but it is definitely happening, and it's definitely having an impact upon us. It's definitely having an impact on the macro systems that are like it is because as soon as like the price of gas,
Brain.
yeah, grain, gas, oil, all
Mm-hmm.
those different they did it, it does impact us. And the question is, um, at some point there's a stress because we don't know exactly what it's in fact impacting or what our governments are telling us it's impacting or what our businesses are telling us impacting. So then there becomes like this trust breach
Mm-hmm.
because the integrity surrounding the information or that potential thing may or may not be correct, or it might be politicized, or it might be just like taken advantage of by way of the markets. Or so even though it's something like, millions of miles away for us, here in the United States, it's difficult because we don't exactly know. But then, you know, when the war first started, I have a cousin who lived in Ukraine for a while, and he was interpersonally conflicted because he actually knew people there, right? So it's not like me where I've never been there, I don't know anybody there. But now I know my cousin who's being affected because of his engagement with actually living with people there. So it is interesting how our different environmental statuses, our ecosystems, they do play a role in creating our lemons.
Yeah, and the thing I was thinking about that prompted that topic today was I was thinking about how hard it is sometimes for me to detach from the closest things to me. So when they're out there a little bit more, it's easier for me to just say things are working out. But sometimes when they're very close to me and I feel like I need to do something or I need to help someone or things aren't working out and I want them to be different, it can be harder for me to detach and just let things go and let other people be responsible for their own outcomes and choices and whatever, because it does impact me. And I feel a lot of responsibility to make sure things go right when I'm talking about my children and about my closest systems.
Absolutely. So how do you I think this is a different way of looking at the idea of boundaries or about self-care or about awareness, because sometimes for example, I was very politically impacted by the Donald Trump phase of presidency and elections because the acidity and the animosity socially, it was overwhelming.
Mhm.
I mean, I'll say I'm not a Trumper, but I just realized I have to do something different because whether he's the president or not, how much does this actually have to impact my life? How much does this actually have to impact my friendships? How much does this have to impact my dialogue with people? Because all my ecosystems were being impacted by the kind of the storm that was created by the the rallying points of this personality. And um as soon as Biden was elected, I realized I just need to turn off the news. So I literally try not to listen to the news anymore. And I realized that in a general way.
I had to do it too. I just used to listen to it on the radio when it came on, and then I was like, nope.
And so I had to then pay attention. I'm like, well, what was the impact on eliminating that from my life? Well, there was less stress, right? So it was definitely a lemon in my life that had I could control by way of shutting out. But the question is, what did I need from that anyway? Like, what was it providing me? Did I lose
Well,
anything by
maybe
cutting it out?
keeping up with the issues and things like that, what's going on.
Yeah, but was there another way that I could do that? And I think there was a little bit. I noticed that the things that I actually really care about, I still kind of followed up on. I would either follow them on Instagram or something else, or I might do some specific searches if I really cared about it. But instead of just subjecting myself to it and then having the consequential collateral damage from everything else that came with it, I could say, I don't need this. I'm okay
Yeah,
to get my
it's really
compartmental information.
empowering.
Yeah,
You
I could
decide that
control.
you can direct your thoughts and your attention.
Yeah, so it was nice to realize I could break a habit. Like I didn't need to be in the system. Like the system didn't need me in order for it to continue, and I didn't need the system in order for myself to continue.
Those habits are very powerful, though. I mean, after many years of doing things the same way, it can be difficult to switch gears.
Absolutely. Well, and I know that for the longest time I was a Facebooker, and I don't even know why. I mean, but I think I had this sense of I could connect through people there and their groups there, and I had family history groups there, and
Mhm.
I created family reunion groups there, And it did seem to be a place that my community, my micro, kind of micro meso community existed in my ecosystem. But I also realized I was putting a lot of effort into keeping it going, but there weren't that many people actually keeping, like, I was sustaining a lot of energy that I didn't like. How important really was it? And
Mm.
and I and so I eventually jumped off Facebook also, just because I thought, it's okay to not necessarily have to have like a daily stimulus of like, I wonder what's happening on this thing, particularly when the algorithms of Facebook started to tell me what I wanted to know. Like, even if I didn't know, I wanted to know that.
Yeah, I found that my interest has waned as they've been tinkering more. I just want to see what my people are up to. I don't want to know, I don't want to see half ads and all the rest of it.
Yeah, and the ads are like, and there's lots of different invasive things that are happening with some of those social media things where you're like, this is not part of my interest. Like, why?
I have the groups that I care about, and these are all random groups you're throwing at me.
Yeah,
I have plenty of groups, like even if I just kept up with the people I care about, it would be plenty of content.
yeah. So I think as I like the idea also of thinking about the ecosystem of grief, and sickness. For example, like my family had a bunch of just rough things last week. Like, I have a daughter who had her wisdom teeth out, and then my wife got sick, and my other kids got sick, and so like I was, just kind of being the nurse to a lot of different things that are happening, which was totally fine and it's appropriate, right? I mean, you can't tell everybody it's not a good time for y'all to be sick. Like, just get it all, put it back together, right? And so, but
I mean, you
but
can, but we're accepting reality now.
yeah, but I also sometimes when you look at the from the bird's eye view of that situation, that wasn't impacting like my neighborhood. That wasn't impacting like my whole church community. It was a fact that like it was like a little micro event happening at my house. And and it made me totally wore me out. But there's a lot of things that were just happening. Like there's a lot of things that it did not impact for that to be going on. And sometimes because nobody else knows, I think when we have those type of lemons, that's where we do have to say, how can I engage my systems in a way that doesn't wear them out, or that might be like be practical, like maybe somebody could bring over meals, or but they also just have to know, right? Like, that's how you have to create trust inside your systems to say, people aren't just going to know that your house is in trauma, or your house is in fatigue, or your house is in sickness, or your house is like wore out.
I
You have
had an
to.
experience like that this week
Yeah, go
where
ahead.
it's been a year since some really hard things have happened in my life. And one of my close friends said, your siblings don't understand, they don't know what's going on. And so I kind of listed out, not to air dirty laundry or not to include them in toxicity or whatever, but just to update them so that they understand um, what I'm dealing with, and um, it it affects their relationships with some other people. So just to make things a little more clear, I think it was helpful.
Oh, good. So how did it go? Like, what was your
They can
feedback?
make their choices based on more information.
Well,
Well,
yeah, what was the feedback like?
um, it was mixed. It was mixed. Um, my situation is pretty complicated and difficult to understand. And so the family members were like, "Hey, we support you, but we really we don't get why you're um not really why you're sharing this, but how it affects us." And it's hard to include them, and it's just complicated. And so I recognize that, and I said, I um I accept that you are going to make your own decisions and interact with these people the way you want to or whatever. Like, I'm not trying to control your life, but here's some extra information, and I'm going to continue to act in ways that are constructive and positive for me. And kind of, this is how you can support me, and there may be some harm, potential harm to you if you're not following my input, but you're grown-ups and you can decide. But at least you have a little more context.
So I'm getting some interesting vibes from that. So some of it was thanks for sharing, but please don't. Or
Well,
I mean, was it actually supportive? Like they're like, we appreciate where you're at and how hard that is.
I
But
mean,
we just
I'm the oldest. So some of my siblings are quite young, right? Not, they're still adults, but I've had a lot of life experience. And before I left this really difficult situation, I had a hard time seeing some of the dynamics too. So I can see that it's difficult without that lived experience to be able to map what's going on. And we're discussing our relationships with the same person, and they're like, we've had this relationship with this person over a long time and we don't understand why things are changing, basically, right? Like, why should we interact any differently than we have before? And so I was sharing some information like, my relationship with this person has changed for some of these reasons that you may not know about. And some of it was supportive, like sorry you're having a hard time. And some of it was just like, why are you making such a big deal about this? It doesn't seem like it's necessary for us to change our relationship with this person. So to give a little bit more context, there was an event that my siblings, there was a Super Bowl, right? And they had this big party, and I chose not to attend the party because this other person was there. And so it's a situation where it's kind of a long-term situation where I'm like, by the way, I won't be coming if this person comes. And so they're like, well, we already invited this person. Okay, that's fine. But in the future, just know that I'm going to choose not to go if this person goes. And they're my family. So I'm like, if you want me to be there, that's what we're doing. So yeah, it was mixed. It was mixed, but I understand there are good reasons why. Like, they're close to this person, they have been for a long time. Some of them never see him, but it was important to me to share where I was at a little bit more. And it has been a year, and some of these siblings haven't had a real conversation with me about it. So, they've already demonstrated their willingness or unwillingness to engage in sharing and support and whatever. I have had some very good expressions of support, but some of it has been pretty distant, right? Like, we live 2 states away. We know you're having a hard time. Good luck with that, but, yeah. And then I've had some other friends who have really been there for me when I've, been upset and more hands-on.
So why did this other person who's not a member of your family actually feel comfortable going to a family event?
Well, okay, so I'm still married to this person. And it's been 20 years, right? Like, not quite, but so over time, he's comfortable. He's an only child, so he likes to interact with my family members. I have 9 siblings. He plays online games with my brothers regularly, so they have established relationships.
Which is interesting. I mean, that's okay.
He's been to that event before, right? They've done Super Bowl parties. They've invited him. He's gone. I mean, whatever, right? Like, I am not such a huge football fan, Super Bowl fan. Like, I got together with other friends and I had a good time, but it's just hard.
And I guess I could see that, like, if we took the word family out of that process and we just said, these are people who would feel more like it's a greater priority to that social group. Like, if you're saying this social group, like your brothers and your husband, Like if it's their, if it is their,
Event.
if it's their event, then it really doesn't matter. If you know, I could see later, like if it's a bar mitzvah or a baptism or something like that, then there might have to be a question of like, what, like how important is the event over who attends? You know, because
Okay, and let's just bring up that 2 weeks ago we had an event like that, and I decided not to go for the same reason, and I missed an important event like that. Like, this is not the first time. And I also planned a birthday party for my 16-year-old who invited this person, and then I wasn't able to go to the party I planned. I chose not to, right? It was my choice. But I planned a party, and then because he was there, I didn't go. So it's been a repetition of some hard things for me.
yeah, and so I guess at some point you would have to say, is it more important that the event happen and that you attend or that you not attend, depending on your boundaries or your safety or your comfort zone? I had some important stuff happen, you know, a while ago, a couple years ago, and my therapist was like wise enough to say, he said, because I left events when some things happened because I got triggered. And
Triggers would be a good topic. We could go for an hour just on triggers.
yeah, and so, but the my therapist said, so your trigger was more important than your participation at that event for that person. And I thought that's a little bit difficult because the person who was at the event, you know, was one of my kids. And so I was so triggered that I couldn't support my child because I was having a moment because somebody else was present. And the therapist says, you know, you should be able to be anywhere and still be yourself because that would in essence be a sign that you're not codependent. Like,
I have found a lot of wisdom in that thought that you've shared with me, that I would like to just be authentic in every situation, and mostly I can. And that's why I wanted to differentiate between all of those other situations that we can handle, and then some of them that are closer that just seem harder.
yeah. Well, I think that's what I'm saying. Like, hold on 1 second, I dropped something.
He disappeared.
That's what I'm saying is like there may be times like where you look at the you know the importance of the soul, the culture, the cultural significance or interpersonal significance of the Super Bowl will probably be less than like a birthday or a wedding or a baptism or a bar mitzvah or whatever. Um, and so you have to say like there may be events where you need to be there because it's about the person versus it's about who's attending. But there may be other times where it's definitely about who's attending. and and sometimes there's the preparation for that. But I think also having the contextual awareness of who's who's important at this point, like who's,
Yeah.
you know, because if you're so traumatized by the presence of somebody there that you can't show up, then you are like you have to be the priority, right? Like you can't be in a state of trauma because that's also not gonna make the other, you know, the focused person feel good, you know, like but then that's also why you might have to like do audibles where you say, you know, like there's two birthday parties or there's two Christmases or there's two things because that way you could break up the exposure, right? Like my
But there
parents.
also has to be a way to mitigate whatever's going on. Like I need to find support that makes it possible for me to do the parenting I'm doing. Like I just have to learn how to do it.
Well, I think you have to learn the balance, right? I mean, that's what you're talking about is the balance in your systems because some things you can do it, some things you can't do it. I mean, like there'll be sometimes where like if there's only going to be one event, you might have to do it because like there's only going to be one event.
Right.
But
I'm not going to let that situation prevent me from participating in something really meaningful. But at the same time, it can be stressful for other people too. Like they may not choose to include one of us. I mean,
Yeah, just so that
even if
the
both of
event,
us wanted to go, that's just the situation right now.
yeah, which is a very hard call for the child or whoever that has to like pick. Um,
Yeah.
and it's also like super unfortunate because there's a lot of life that has to be lived. So like how do you balance that? You know, there will be only one, like the person only gets married one time, you know. So you couldn't have
Yeah.
two weddings. Like you'd have to figure out, well, how do I participate in this? So there's and some of that, like for example, on the parenting side, is how do you get to the point that if you're going to co-parent or even pretend to co-parent, like you have to at some point be able to be somewhat present, you know, like, but it's a tough, that is definitely a tough like ecosystem factor, right? Is the presence of something that's definitely a negative vibe. Like I was just listening to a book on the law of attraction again, and
Which one?
this was the law of attraction for successful relationships.
Oh, nice.
And the idea is the same, you know, the idea of frequencies and vibes and what you're generating, and low energy set like low energy things, high energy things, versus like
Yeah.
gratitude is a higher energy than sadness, which is obviously can be a lower positive energy. But I think that as I
Who's
was
the
listening,
author?
as I was listening to this frequencies things, I think that we also have those frequencies that are just disruptive, right? They're not necessarily attracting frequencies, but that doesn't mean that they're not frequencies. You know, like when somebody's super negative, that's still a frequency. It's Elena G. Rivers, Law of Attraction for Amazing Relationships. As I try to think about, because we set our own frequencies, right? We set our own, nobody else sets our frequency.
And the
And
way we set it is by putting our attention on thoughts
yeah, well,
or feeling things.
yeah, the way we because she really focuses on the fact that we don't generate our thoughts, like thoughts kind of come in and we accept them or we don't accept them, or we entertain them. So like, you know, something might come into our minds that we then say, oh, I like this idea, or I don't like this idea, or I'll play with this idea, or I'm gonna actually brood over this idea. I'm gonna like massage this idea until it's totally destroyed and I'm absolutely pissed off. Or I'm gonna like brood on this idea until I am bawling, or I'm gonna embrace this idea and I'm gonna be laughing and I'm gonna really enjoy life. I mean, so we it's like a choice how we're going to like play with our frequencies, but that frequency generates other frequencies. So like the year that I said I'm gonna make $1 million, it definitely wasn't so much about actually making the $1 million, but it was very much about the frequency that I shared with other people, and it generated other frequencies, like positive frequencies, because I was seeking this frequency, like I'm seeking a proactive, energetic, productive frequency, and I was finding it. Like it was an amazingly stimulating year because of the vibe I was giving out and the energy and the push and that's that, right?
When
But I
was
also
that? What year was
that's
that?
2017,
So that was not long before everything changed.
right? And so I also noticed like after the car accident, I put on very different frequencies. And they were kind of like sad frequencies because it was so unproductive and it was so, you know, like depression, lots of stuff like that. And
Yeah.
there's definitely a dynamic in that frequency that I'm still responsible for generating. Like I'm still the thing that is, it's kind of weird to say you know, you should just choose to be happy, but because that's not easy. Like I am in no way saying there's a shortcut to getting positive frequencies. But I think you do have to work at, to the extent that you're able, channeling yourself towards things that create positive frequencies. Like I just have you experienced the kindness diaries? Oh, you got to check this book. It's not a book. It was a Netflix series, but it's also been on BYU TV. It's been on other like channels like that. I think it's on Peacock potentially. But it's this guy who initially traveled across the United States on $5 a day, relying on the kindness of strangers. He did the same thing in Europe, $5 a day, kindness of strangers. And then he said, I want to circumnavigate the world for free. Like he's going to spend no money and he's going to rely totally on the kindness of strangers for food and housing and transportation. And no, he had, yeah, transfer. He had a bike that he called Kindness One. That's a yellow motorcycle with a side carriage. And he even asked people to help fill up his gas tank. And he circumnavigates the world, does it twice.
That's a good skill.
Yeah, but he also he had been like a stockbroker and so he'd made lots of money.
He was, yeah, persuasive guy.
So the kick that comes is these people will be kind to him. And there's some people who are kind of like middle class and it's like okay, like you could tell that they didn't necessarily they had the ability and it was fine. And so he might just share their meal and maybe sleep at their house. And he's just like he's very gracious, but then there's others that he'll notice they really need something. Like a guy in India had two sons and he's super broke, but yet he still allows him to sleep on his his floor in his house. And so this guy pays for his two boys to go to school all the way through high school.
Wow.
And um and it's in India, so it's not like it's America prices. But the fact
No,
that
but
like
what a difference in his life from that act of kindness.
yeah, and so like it's totally unexpected, right? So this guy just does like the smallest amount possible because that's all they can do. And this guy just like kind of it's almost like a kindness avalanche because they're just like
He's like an
overwhelmed.
angel.
Yeah, so it's an inspiring show because of the vibe that it has.
How do we do that show, Travis?
I know.
That sounds awesome. I mean,
Well,
all over that.
I know. Well, I just barely if you look up kindness diaries, I realize this guy has books that he's written,
Hmm.
and one of them is Be Kind. Bra let me grab it.
While you're away, I have a thought. You were saying that it's hard to get from, sometimes it's hard to get from one place to another if it's too big of a stretch, to just be happy or whatever. And so the Abraham Hicks people would say that you just reach for a thought that feels better. So
Yeah,
if you're really struggling and you're in a bad place, you won't be able to jump levels, but you can get gradually better if you continue to just try and think of any thought that feels better.
I totally agree with that. Like I have issues with depression and stuff like that for what variety of reasons, but then so it's like I can be super proactive and energized and excited, and then like there's kind of like this. Then I wake up the next day and maybe I'm not that day. And a lot of times it's a sense of it will pass. Like it's amazing how if we just even just stay long enough and kind of just think creative, like you just identified, it will pass. Sometimes it's like at night. I don't know why nights are so depressing sometimes, but it's just go to sleep. Because when you wake up in the morning, like it's something else happened. Like you rested, your body kind of healed, your body like, whatever.
Mm,
So
reset.
I totally agree. So this is the I don't know if you can see. Oh, that's really weird on that.
Go be kind. I'll put it on my list.
How come it's like not able, like background stink? Go be kind. Um, and this guy's name is Leon Logothetis. I don't know
It
if I said.
sounds like his stories would be worth doing, filling up his gas tank or whatever. He's probably a really fun guy to talk to.
Yeah, well, so I picked this book up because I'm like, I'm gonna see what this guy says. Just I'm gonna vibe with him and just see how it goes. And
It supports his work by buying his book.
yeah, like I totally agree with that too. So I the I didn't realize that they're actually challenges. So this book is
Mm.
28 and a half days of challenges. And the first one was to create a definition of kindness and then share it with someone. And what was interesting is that as soon as I kind of accepted the willingness to do that, I um I would think of a person who has been kind, and I shared it with them so that I could say thank you for being kind in this specific way. And then as I kept scrolling through my phone, I realized there was other people who had did a different kind of kindness. So my definition changed, but it allowed me to share another kindness, right? Like as I was able to be I was able to be grateful, which is a frequency, a vibe, right?
Oh, that's a very high one. That's a good one to always
Yeah, and
focus on.
gratefulness is also a form of kindness because
Mm.
you're recognizing, you're recognizing somebody else's contribution to your life. And I felt happier. I did. Like it's funny because you're like, I'm just being grateful. And it,
Gratitude journals are powerful.
yeah, it's surprising how just being grateful changes the frequency and allows something else to happen. I've also noticed that laughter, like not laughter at somebody, but just kind of genuine laughter can also change frequencies.
You can
Um,
only focus on one thing at a time. So if you're focused on gratitude, it's you're matching those high frequencies.
yeah. And I think as we think about ecosystems, um, part of that paradigm we have about our ecosystem is how we're seeing it. And if we're seeing it through a vibrant, a vibration of gratitude or a vibration of kindness or a vibration of love, it changes our ecosystem.
Well, if you're accepting the premise that you're magnetically attracting things, if you can sit for 1 minute and be grateful, it will draw other things to be grateful for, like you noticed. And if you can continue to snowball on all of that gratitude, it it really grows and continues.
Right. So yeah, and I think that it has this like super weird compounding effect on your ecosystem, right? Because then people also recognize happiness, they recognize that frequency, they recognize like you're a vibe they want to be next to. And so
Well, you
it
attract things to be grateful for too. So good
correct.
things will show up for you.
Yeah, yeah. I also found a Huffington Post article on how to enhance your happiness state. And I just have this sitting here by me that I thought it was interesting. The first one was the most important to me, which I found very interesting, was dwell in awe. Like
Dwell.
yeah, dwell in awe. And as soon as I saw that, it really connected to me because I really like awe. I really like variety. I really like surprises. I like things that I wasn't expecting. For example, when I just recently went to Arizona on this trip, I had a place that I was going, but as soon as I thought about dwelling in awe, I immediately was more grateful for all the things I wasn't expecting that I found that were more exciting. Like the place I ultimately went was Tombstone, which was all right. Like I'm glad that I saw it, but I was not overwhelmed with like, ooh, this is cool. Like but the interesting thing is this summer I was not planning to go to Deadwood, South Dakota. I stumbled upon Deadwood, South Dakota, which was also a gunslinger town. And there was a sense of awe because I didn't understand that place even existed. Like I stumbled upon it. I also like Calamity Jane. I did some family history. She was related to my wife's line, and Wild Bill Hickok was related to my line. So there became like a family history connection. So that was like that was an awe. Like I stumbled upon it. Um, I also look. I have like some specific like souvenirs I try to get, in every town. And most of
Wow.
like some towns are kind of horrible with them. Like
Okay.
they're not creative. And so I had to go to a whole bunch of souvenir shops before I found the souvenirs that I vibed with. And again, that's like this stumbling upon, right? Like if I just found the
What
shop,
are they? What are the items? Now we need to know.
well, I like to find like I don't know if you can see this, but this is it's not showing up. Uh, there you go. I mean, it's a postcard of the Ogden Canyon, but it's kind of vintage-ish.
Okay.
So it's like vector art. So I like vector art postcards of a town that kind of bring out the vintageness to it. So I then
Do
also
you put
look,
it together so you can see where you've been?
not necessarily. I just like to kind of have things around me so I can look at them. Like they're like my totems. Like they're like my
They're
little
like your vision board.
yeah. And they kind of say that I'm like I was there, like I went, and then this is my little token of where I went. But I
Mhm.
also like stickers that I put in my journal. So like and it's kind of a fun way to just put instead of on my suitcase, like Jimmy Stewart in It's a Wonderful Life, has a suitcase with all the stickers on it. Like I do that with my journal, put like little
Hmm.
cities um stickers. I also will buy some t-shirts for my family.
Mhm.
And usually like I like quality t-shirts. Like I don't want like just gimmicky little like everybody's got the same 1,000 shirts or whatever, but so anyway, like I have to find something that vibes with me. So stumbling upon a souvenir shop was again like a sense of awe.
Hmm.
And it's the same thing that happened through that trip. Like I wasn't planning to go to Horseshoe Bend near Lake Powell, but
Mhm.
I've seen that picture a whole bunch of times and I didn't realize it's actually just off the side of the road. And so I stumbled upon that, right? So like there's this sense of awe in the fact that I'm like, oh, here this is, or um, and so I like the idea when I think about happiness and like lemons and ecosystems. Do we look at our systems and say, that thing was actually surprisingly enjoyable? Like that thing was different than I was expecting. Like that was a little like sense of juice where you're like, wow, like I liked that I wasn't expecting that enjoyment, but there it was.
If you're looking for enjoyment, it's a lot more likely you'll find it than if you're just going along or looking for things that you are uncomfortable.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's the sense of allowing unexpected things to happen and be different, right? Like if I just stayed on my route, I just have to get just to Tombstone. Who knows what I wouldn't have experienced, right? But actually saying, I'm gonna take this side road. I'm gonna take this side road. I'm gonna just try this out. It opens you to this sense of this is something I never experienced. Like I'm not gonna say that that hasn't backfired. I have taken some roads and I'm like, oh wow, like this is way longer than I thought it was gonna be.
Done that. I think there's a whole thing about people who are lucky, who consider themselves lucky. I think that relates to this, where people are like, I win all the time, and they expect to win, and they believe they'll win, and they win. And sometimes people feel like they're unlucky, and they notice that a lot of bad things happen, and they seem to follow them around. So looking for ways that you're winning and lucky can really be positive.
Yeah, yeah. Well, even as you just said that, it reminds me of Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. And sometimes what he would do in the concentration camp is like, that guy's getting beat up, but I have a piece of bread in my pocket. And it's like that's his luckiness. He's not getting beat up and he has a piece of like crumb of bread in his pocket. How horrible. Another part of this article, it says celebrate another's joy. I think that is a very interesting thing to think about is changing the paradigms about how we see other people and their successes and
Uh-huh.
and where they're at and not having it as a reverberating negative to us. Like just because they have, then I
Feeling
must not have.
deprived.
Yeah. And I think this is a really good exercise because it totally makes it just helps you step back and just realize if it's all about you, like that's not a good sign.
Right.
Like it's okay for other people to be successful, for other people to have enjoyment. But it also, as soon as you do that, it opens the door for you to be successful because you just changed your vibe.
Well, those are the people that you want to mentor you, the people that are succeeding.
Right.
If
And
you're
it's
like those lousy rich people that are doing so awesome at work, how are you going to get in their circles? You
yeah, but
have
if
to
you're
think like they do.
which includes being grateful that they're successful, like be
Well, that's about the abundant mindset that we talk about too. Like there's no limit to the number of people who can be successful and the amount of success. It's not like someone else's success takes away from your opportunity.
absolutely, I totally agree. Which then comes into the next on this list was make a gratitude list, which is count your many blessings, right? Or like count your blessings instead of sheep, or and when you start to recognize, just how many things actually go okay for you, or that it could be worse, like that's a vibe changer.
Well, that goes to mindfulness too. Like you can think, you can collect your grievances over your whole life and focus on how people ripped you off and cheated you and whatever. Or you can be like, where am I today? I have all of these wonderful advantages living where I live and interacting with these people. If you can just look at today and not like what's going to happen to me tomorrow. This guy who's traveling around the world is focused on how do I feed myself today? Where am I sleeping tonight? And he's really focused on that maximum power area of the moment now that I can act.
Yeah, well, and I think what's also interesting is that he's not, in fact, in a desperate mode. Like he has the resources if he's really like if it's not going to work out, he could go get a Hilton.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
so being
But
able,
basically, he does trust in the goodwill of other people enough to even put together that experiment. If he
yeah,
thought people wouldn't feed him and house him, it wouldn't make sense to try that.
oh yeah, yeah. Well, what I'm saying is that what I guess the difference between a person who's absolutely desperate and this guy is that he has the resources to psychologically
I see
invest
that.
in trust, like
Yes.
to say, I believe people are good, and I'm okay to try this out because I'm already good. I'm
Well, he
okay to.
doesn't have like a day job that he's tied to. He's not like, if I work hard all day long, I can feed myself dinner.
Well, and even as I looked at his social media, he hasn't really put himself out there a lot. Like I was surprised at the amount of things that are not happening around him. So it's not, I also like, I guess what I'm saying is he didn't do it just to become like an influencer or just to become someone who's like, look at me, go be kind.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know. I'm really liking this ecosystem thing because it's surprising how much like one of the things that also comes up is our point of connection or our connectivity with others.
Mm-hmm.
I know that this is something that at times I struggle with because I am an introvert at times. I like my nomadic, isolated time. Um, but it is interesting that a lot of happiness does come from the reverberations you get from other people. You know, like when I see my kids smile, uh, there's a there's an undeniable, powerful impact from that smile, right? Or to when my kids hug me, or when my kids engage with me, or like when you see kindness from other people, there it is amazing how there's a different connectivity than just your own personal sense of awe, like in a flower or in a book or in an idea. There's
Well,
a
you wouldn't
different
want to
level.
live on an island alone 24. Maybe you would. I don't know. Maybe you would. But there are people that like the space and the alone time and then come connect with people and then go back.
Yeah, I think that the question is how do you rejuvenate? And it's not bad to have alone time for rejuvenation or whatever that might be. Um, but despite I guess I'm identifying a potential skepticism about needing people all the time or regularly. I think it is fairly undeniable that when you're around the people who you care about and you have positive experience with you, that is something that's hard to replace. Like it is,
They add to your life.
yeah, it's hard to say you don't need anybody. Like if you don't need anybody, there's potentially something wrong.
So this book I mentioned to you that I've been listening to, oh shoot,
You have to tell me again, I'll write it down.
uh I had it right at the beginning and then no, I don't. But it said that with the codependent stuff, you don't want to be dependent on other people, but you do want to be connected to God all the time. And I thought that was really nice.
I think it is nice. I think that the difference though is that you can't make God part of your codependent problem in that God should not be an oppressor. Like God should not be a dictator. Like if God
Mhm.
is your friend and God is trying to help you solve problems and he's a partner, he or she is a partner with you in your process, then that makes more sense, right? If God is somebody that you can trust, that you can rely upon, that you can engage with in a healthy, productive way, then that makes sense. Like I've had points in time where I saw God as the persecutor, avenger, chastiser. And at some point I said, like I need you to back off. like, like if you're that kind of help to me, that's not working. But I realized it was also about how I needed to change the way I saw God. That Rabbi Kushner has a book that is when bad things happen to good people. And he
Yeah.
says, if you see God as this person who's punishing you or messing with your life in a way to make it negative, like you should really change the way you see God.
Right.
If God is not a resource to you, if God is not kind, if God is not loving, if God is not helping you overcome these things, like then you have the wrong God.
Okay, so yes, here's where this book is called Let Go Now, Embrace Detachment as a Path to Freedom. And part of what you're mentioning sounds like the healthy kind of detachment where you can still care about someone and you can still be involved with someone and let them live their life. So I can really see the way learning more about detachment and how that can work can help us understand better what God is doing. It's you can love someone and care about them and want good things for them and still um, have them retain their own responsibility over their life.
Hey, that book is actually free on Audible.
I recommend it.
I'm going to add it to my library.
I thought I got it from you, actually. I've been trying to learn a lot more about that stuff. I found some of those attachment principles really useful in this hard year, and I've appreciated you sharing those thoughts with me.
Yeah, I also what I've recognized is that sometimes I become the reactionary detachment where I've realized I have been in the process of maybe relying a little bit too much on people for emotional sustaining value, whatever. Like that's where the codependency comes from, right? Is you're like, I want this person in my life, but I also need them to be exactly the way I need them to be so that I'm not like stressed out around them. And I need them to be happy because then I won't be stressed out around them. I need them to be excited because then I won't be stressed out around them. But ultimately, the more connected I am to my own self as a whole person or a healthy person, I don't have to worry about what people are doing. Like they can do whatever they're going to do. I can still be around them. That's that my
Wait,
therapist saying
yeah,
I should be able to be authentic around whoever
all the
without
time.
being a problem. Right.
And you
Um,
can be a caring person authentically and also have your boundaries.
yeah, absolutely. But I also think you have to be able to, that's where I have to be vulnerable. Like for me, the process is now be vulnerable enough to have people in my system that I don't need to worry about. Like everybody's fine being themselves. Like I used to be a huge rescuer
Yeah.
because rescuing allowed me to feel that the world was back in order.
Was that a thing that you see with other attorneys?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, maybe, but I think it's definitely social workers. There are therapists. There are definitely mediators. You know, there are people out there who are the people who are rescuing all the time so that the world can get back in order and then they don't have to be in conflict.
Yeah.
Where then they become, this is that triangle, right? That the rescuer becomes the persecutor because they're upset that they haven't been rescued yet. Or I wouldn't have to rescue you if you got your life together.
I have found a lot of peace removing myself from that cycle.
Yeah. So when you and I what's there's the rescuer, the
Victim.
persecutor, the victim, right? Like, look, I am persecuting you because you've punished my life. I tried to rescue you. I'm the
No,
good
there is
person.
no way to win that game.
Yeah, yeah,
No matter what position you're in, there is no winning. You just
yeah.
got to take accountability. There's that. Oh man, now I'm forgetting it. The Conflict Without Casualties book has an overlay. Instead of those three roles, there are three constructive positive roles.
Oh,
And
okay.
so you can learn how to get into a virtuous cycle.
Okay, that's cool. You should share that with me. I don't have that one. Would you
You know
just
what?
call it? What's the name of that book?
Oh, I've read it up like 3 different sessions. Conflict Without Casualties. It's really good. If you're trying to leave that drama triangle.
I just don't think I recall that constructive triangle being
Oh,
mentioned.
yeah. Well, that's one thing I really liked about it because it was really relevant. Because if you've been in those types of habits over a long time, you learn them from your family and you've practiced them. It's good to know what the alternatives are.
Well, and even just thinking about it, I'm anticipating that the opposites involve kind of a detachment where you allow people to process themselves inside that triangle, like maybe not rescuing them, you know, not not being defensive about what they're having in their own personal experience, you
Yep.
know, not maybe defending them a little bit, like maybe helping people, like you buoy people up instead of persecute them.
Well, there some people find the change away from that pattern very distressing. And so even when you're going to a healthier place, they'll drag you back into it. And it's really easy to get back into it. People who are feeling the victim have to find a perpetrator or a persecutor. And, you know,
So
you can perpetuate that just by yourself. The other person doesn't have to do anything for you to make them mentally persecuting you if you feel that need to be a victim.
right.
And if you don't want to be a victim, then you can't have the persecutor because as soon as you make someone a persecutor and yourself a victim, then you're disempowered. So you have to find that's where the Loving What Is book is so useful for you to say that person didn't do anything except as part of teamwork where I accepted inappropriate behavior and I allowed that situation to continue.
Yeah, I like the idea. I mean, you're referencing accountability, and I think that seeing ourselves clearly is such a huge part of overcoming lemons. You know, just what role do I play in the world I live in? That's more significant than what role other people's play in my system because the way I feel about them, the way I engage with them, but also the way I feel about myself in connection to that, like our vibes
It's
in relation.
easier to go there when you feel good about yourself first. So people who are feeling like I'm worthless can't take that I'm also responsible for all that pain. Like that big moment you talk about sometimes where you're like, the reason I don't have this is because of me and my choices and my actions. And when you're already feeling down, to be like, I'm the cause of all my problems is really overwhelming. But if you can start to accept, that's where that you're connected to God all the time. Like you're worthy right now. Wherever you are already okay as a person. You don't have to prove that you're good enough or valuable or valid or any of those things. And then you can start to make those changes because it's not so threatening that you're messing up or you're unworthy or you're defective or whatever.
Yeah, and I think even as you say that, like sometimes I just say, God, I am defective. I am defective today. I like
Oh,
tomorrow, well, but I think also embracing that, right? Like Herman Hesse in his book Deviant, it's the idea of like sometimes we have this quest to purify ourselves of all evil or all negative or all darkness or all whatever.
perfectionism.
Yeah, and but it's like the perfectionism is it's really this sense that it's like a quest that is like out of control where if we can actually embrace our darkness and live with it and sit with it and say, I'm a person who's dark sometimes. I'm a person who
I
fails.
am a human being and I have to integrate every part of me. I can't just reject whatever this other stuff is of me. I have to love everything,
Yeah, like I,
love where I am right now, and realize that I'm better than I was yesterday. And tomorrow I'll be even different and better and
yeah, well, and then there's no,
lovable.
yeah, and then there's no shame connected to it, right? Because you're not like, I don't need to be embarrassed that I have dark days. Like, I know that for me, that for example, growing up, we didn't talk about going to therapists because like you just weren't supposed to be weak enough to have to go to a therapist.
Yeah, what's
Or
wrong with you? Are
we're
you
now,
messed up?
yeah, we're now like I openly just say I like, even when I go to church, I'll tell people, yeah, I go to a therapist and I think everybody should, if like
He's
if you
super
need
helpful. I'm so glad I have a therapist. He gets
yeah.
me.
And I think that being able to live with that vulnerability, like, if it's a problem for you that I go to a therapist, I guess that's your problem.
I mean, some people self-medicate in all kinds of destructive ways, and if they got a therapist, they might not have to do I mean, they not that they have to, but people cope in a lot of ways that aren't very helpful.
Yeah, I would say a lot of people cope in ways that are not helpful, right? They just like whether
Even if
it's
you're just checking out from everything.
yeah. So why don't you I think we're about at our time. Like, how would you summarize our ecosystem? How would you summarize this for today? What would you say?
Oh man, putting me on the spot. Well, there are a lot of interacting factors in our environment, and they affect the way we cope with things, but we have a lot of control over the way we see them and the way we respond. When we're having a hard time, we look for support at the levels that are the closest to us. We might feel like the people who are supposed to care for us are responsible to help us with our feelings and with the difficulty. But if we can find that gratitude and we can make the choices that are available to us to do the best that we can and accept that some days will be hard, um, there's a lot to be grateful for. All is well.
It definitely can be all well. I think
Well,
I guess what I like about the ecosystem discussion is we get to be aware of where we live, right? We get to be aware of the systems, the different five systems or whatever, but we have to choose to be that aware. Like we have to choose gratitude. We have to choose, like we have to consciously engage in that ecosystem to overcome the lemon of our system, right? If it is how we're seeing it, if it's a person in our system, if it's a whatever in our system, like we have to choose how we're going to embrace altering our own paradigm and awareness about the lemons and the systems, right?
And we've also talked about the codependence. Like if you're so busy worried about somebody else's business, then you don't have time to take care of your own issues.
Absolutely. This has been a great discussion. I'm again glad that we have these, and grateful we have these, and there's others. I think we have another one coming tomorrow, right?
I think we do.
Oh no, tomorrow's it's a different thing, but I think on Thursday, strategic manifestation.
Oh, great.
Yeah, so those are always good. If anybody would like to join us, those are just where we work on, orientating our minds towards like a lot of the things we're talking about now, vibrations that help us manifest the life we want to live. So it'd be great to have people join us then. All right, have a good one. We'll see you.
I'm wondering if